Professor Mallokh, thank you very much for being with us tonight. It's very kind of you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, first of all, what do you think of Donald Trump as a president so far? And what do you think about the world reaction to his presidency so far?
Well, of course, he was elected by the American people. He's not a candidate that ran to run a world government. So I think he's putting America first. And I think most people are saying he's very active. He's making significant changes and taking down the legacy of President Obama. So it's a radically different American political operation than we had in the last 8 years.
Can I ask you, how did you cross paths with him, personally and intellectually, if you want?
I met him over 20 years ago in Florida, in Palm Beach, where he was very active and actually remains active in philanthropy and charitable events, golf tournaments and black tie dinners to raise money, mostly for medical causes. Well, I think that Donald Trump is a doer. So he, of course, is a real estate magnate and a builder, and he is not a political actor. He never held political office, so he's really very much like, if you can imagine this, a businessman or a chief executive taking power. He makes lists, and he tries to fulfill the promises that he keeps on those lists. It's very much like a builder building a house.
Let me ask you now, do you think the Eurozone as a whole is going to survive? What's your own assessment?
Well, I think there certainly will be a Europe. Whether the Eurozone survives, I think is very much a question that is on the agenda. We've had the exit of the United Kingdom. There are elections in other European countries. So I think it's something that will be determined over the course of the next year, year and a half. I think it is interesting, from the perspective of Greece is, why is Greece again on the brink? It seems like a deja vu. Will it ever end? I think this time I would have to say that the odds are higher that Greece itself will break out of the euro.
But, you said that the other day on an interview with Bloomberg and has created quite a bit of stir here. The thing is, I don't know how much you know about the Greek economy, but it's definitely not self-sufficient. We have to import even basic things like food in order to survive. How do you see Greece outside the Eurozone dealing with this kind of situation?
Well, I think it may be a necessity. It's a good question. Why? To put the question why first, not how. If the IMF will not participate in a new bailout that does not include substantial debt relief, and that's what they're saying, then that more or less ensures a collision course with Eurozone creditors. Now, we all know that primarily pressures Germany, which remains opposed to any such action. So I think this suggests that Greece might have to sever ties and do a Grexit and exit the euro. So that's the first fact. I think if you look at the reality, the situation is basically unfolding in a certain direction. What comes afterwards, I think, is a very interesting and important question. I think we have to face some facts. The first one is that the harsh austerity programs have been a complete failure. I've traveled to Greece. I know lots of Greek people. I have academic friends in Greece. And they say that these austerity plans are really deeply hurting the Greek people and that the situation is simply unsustainable. So you might have to ask the question if what comes next could possibly be worse than what's happening now.
But do you think there's any chance that the US, given the circumstances, would ever finance Greek needs in the first couple of years? Because there's definitely going to be a deficit in the beginning. And we also have, as you know, security requirements, the neighborhood being what it is.
Yeah, no, I think Greek-US relations are strong, could become stronger. I know some Greek economists who have even gone to leading think tanks in the United States to discuss this topic and the question of dollarization. Such a topic, of course, freaks out the Germans because they really don't want to hear such ideas. I think what Greece badly needs, if we were to think of it economically, and here I'm really putting on an economist hat, is supply-side reforms. It needs debt restructuring. It really needs debt relief. And I know people in Europe don't want to hear that, but these new plans should probably happen under the IMF or the World Bank, and they need to reduce the debt overhang. And that means, frankly, something that people in Germany and elsewhere have not been able to accept. That means a haircut to the lenders and to the banks in Germany, and probably, at least in my perspective, a return to the drachma. So the problem then is who and how will you manage that transition, to avoid all the chaos and now all of the instability. Very, very major question, I think, on the immediate horizon.
Now, let me ask you, because, your statements carry quite a heavy weight, because, among other things, you've been rumored to be the next U.S. ambassador to the EU. So let me ask you, first of all, is that definitely going to happen, the nomination, or is that something that's still in the works?
Well, it's certainly in the works. It's a decision that's made by the president himself. I have obviously interviewed and talked to the transition team, so we're waiting on the announcement.
And let me ask you, because, it should be clear, to our audience and to opinion makers here in Athens. When you express this opinion about, us going back to the drachma and so on, is this something which is sort of authorized by the Trump administration? Is this a Trump position, in other words?
Well, it's not something that I have discussed at all with President Trump or the State Department or anyone in the Treasury. But, I would remind your audience that no one less than President Trump himself about a year ago tweeted, and I would quote that, "The Greeks are wasting their time in the Eurozone." So you have it directly from the person. You don't need an intermediary. I personally think he was right. I'd also say that this probably should have been instigated 4 years ago, frankly. It probably would have been easier or simpler to do. So I also look at the polls, and in Greece, I'm actually, moderately surprised to see that now the majority of Greek citizens themselves in a recent poll say that it was wrong to join the euro in the first place. Now you can't put put it back in time, but the question is, what does it look like going forward?
But if you look at some recent polls also, the overwhelming majority is still supporting the euro, not the drachma, not the return to the drachma, at this point.
Well, I guess the polling that I've seen recently suggests otherwise. Maybe there's some ambivalence in polling, and maybe we shouldn't put too much stock in any given poll.
And let me also ask you, what do you think the U.S. Position should be on whether the IMF should remain in the Greek program? There's a very important board meeting going on tonight when we're doing this interview. And what do you think the U.S. official position is going to be with this new administration on that?
Well, we'll see if it changes. My sense is that over time it could change, and that the U.S. is going to basically push the IMF in the direction of the kinds of reforms I've been suggesting, and a more substantial debt restructuring, including debt relief.
And if you spoke to the Greek Prime Minister, what kind of advice would you give him? Because one side is what you're saying about the debt relief and so on, but you're also talking about some very drastic reforms within the country. Isn't that the case? Or?
Well, we've been through this, it seems like, 4 or 5 times. So I would ask the question, again, as an economist, a market-based economist, how can we get growth to return to the Greek economy? That should be the goal. How can you increase private sector activity? How can you actually bring about tax reduction? How can you instigate more private-public partnerships? How can you make the Greek economy more competitive? That would be the set of questions I'd be asking. They're not really politicized questions. Those are economic questions. But frankly, I don't see how you do that inside a euro that's tilted towards other players in Central Europe and Germany.
And out of curiosity, have you met any Greek politicians that you have discussed this with?
I haven't met any Greek politicians. I have met any number of really fine Greek economists, both at Oxford and in the United States.
Have you met Mr. Varoufakis by any chance?
I've never met him, but I've certainly read stories about him. I'd love to meet him.
Okay. And finally, let me ask you, there's been quite a bit of reaction to your potential nomination in Europe, as you know. Did you expect that, and how are you going to deal with it once you're nominated?
Well, we're not trying to ruffle any feathers. We're simply stating that under the Trump administration, there will be some different attitudes towards multilateral institutions, and particularly to supranational organizations. So the relationship with the EU will certainly be different. Obviously, President Trump himself favored Brexit, so he's not suggesting that it's right or one size fits all. What we'd like to see is various countries in Europe make that democratic decision for themselves.
And finally, where I started from, your prediction, your honest prediction about whether the Eurozone and the European Union as a project is going to survive the next decade.
Oh, the next decade? Well, that is a very long-term prospect. My sense is that the euro is in a real problem zone. There'll be parity with the dollar, and there could potentially, given political situations around Europe, even be a euro collapse. As to the future of the European Union, I think that it will probably, there are 3 or 4 different voices, even within Brussels itself. It will probably take a different shape and form than it has presently.
Professor, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being with us tonight.
Thank you.